Welcome to New York Spin's meeting for March 20th, 2018. First of all, our venue sponsor is Wells Fargo Advisors. We also like to thank Pearson Education, O'Reilly Media, Auerbach Publications, Pragmatic Bookshelf, and Wiley Publications. One other sponsor, very important sponsor, the Internet Society, who provides videography. And I'm going to introduce our panel moderator. Let's welcome the principal of Adelsberg Consulting, Gordon Adelsberg.
Give it up. Let's hear some more applause. There it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
And where are our panelists? Come on up. So, quick history. There's an article, Shameless Promotion, that I wrote on LinkedIn. He was one of the people I interviewed. It's called The Folly of First Fixing Technology and How to Fend Off This Fiasco. So the link is bit.ly fix process first. So we're going to talk about what happens if you try to fix your process, if you try to fix your technology and make those technology upgrades before you've really figured out your process. And I have 4 process project software experts up here. We're going to go through, say your name, Kris Orr, tell us 1 or 2 things about yourself. One quick project, let's keep it really quick so we can get right into our panel.
Sure, so Kris Orr, I have done both business process consulting as well as back-end and web development, so I kind of have a perspective of both kind of the hands-on technical aspects of projects as well as kind of governing the change management. So I've got plenty of examples to talk about, and happy to do so.
Hi, Reema Mishra, 18 years in process improvement based on model-based software development organizations, clients, global clients, now managing operations, and process is a way of doing things every day. Happy to be back to Spin and this community.
Yep. Deepak Lalwani. I've been working in the change and transformation space for about 15 plus years. I was trained at Accenture, spent a lot of time there, and then built a practice at a mid-sized consultancy, and now I've been independent or with my own boutique for about 4 years.
My name is Joe Rojas, and I've spent, 20, 30 years fooling around in process improvement in all different areas. I worked for the Department of Defense for a bit. After the DoD, I went into biomedical engineering and did process improvement there. And then after biomedical engineering, I ended up in managed services and worked as a VCIO, helping understand the business case and how to bridge the business case between developers and the companies to be able to produce the outcomes that they were looking for.
And now?
And now I help companies. So what I do is I work with small businesses now, and I help companies that are under $1 million get over $1 million by implementing a process that we have that takes them step by step to get to where they need to be. So that's what we do.
Great. All right. So we got a bunch of questions here. One that I always find fun is to talk about a colossal failure you've seen with the software implementation. So I think you said you had one you wanted to share.
Yeah, and actually, let me preface this by saying I actually was the one who kind of recommended putting this on the board because, so you'll see that it's some of it, obviously it's meant to be funny, cartoon here with the front end and the back end, and so that back end piece is something that most people just don't know about, and it's basically what's strangling your process growth.
The sales guy said sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, exactly. This is what it's going to do for you, and this is actually how it looks. So I'll give you an example of what I will, I guess, define as colossal failure. Our retail department at I want to protect the innocent, so I won't name the name of the company, but we have a retail operation. Definitely needed to put in a new system. All of that was agreed. But in doing so, basically, she had to kind of define a whole new set of processes for this new application. and didn't really involve anybody from IT or who really had kind of a systems perspective. She really tried her best to understand how the new software worked, but in doing so didn't really understand that the software was designed to capture the actual cashier who's actually logging into the system to use it. And because she didn't quite understand this, she thought because at any given day there's always going to be 2 cashiers using a particular register, that we basically needed 2 physical drawers to register the transaction so that she could basically know how to reconcile the transactions done by one cashier versus another. It was a very complicated and kind of awkward implementation, and we had to get custom reports out of it based on kind of this custom application, custom implementation, and all of which I didn't really hear about until after the fact. And the failure in it was that it became this thing that consistently broke. Again, we had to kind of pay quite a bit more as a company in order to create all of these customizations. And at the very end of the day, all of them simply weren't needed because, the person who's, again, kind of a business-oriented individual who just didn't understand the software itself, didn't understand that out of the box the software could have done this, just had the process been defined differently. Each cashier could have logged in as themselves. And the reconciliation of the drawer could have been a lot smoother. So, that's just kind of an example of where I would say, the business user just didn't quite have the right people in the room to decide how to go forward with it. And I guess I'll just tack on the fact that I guess in my experience, I'm seeing more of kind of a tug of war between kind of the business users and the IT, engineering side of the house in terms of how process is defined. Because traditionally speaking, processes were defined by the business unit, right? They're responsible for the KPIs, they define the process. And that's all well and good, but I guess, one of the main reasons I'm here tonight is to kind of propose the idea that, without engineering a part of that strategy, and without them giving their insight into like how the process in fact should be designed, I think you kind of are at least at the risk of processes that aren't as smooth as they could be.
You look like you have something you're dying to share.
No, I'm just thinking, right? So I wear another hat where I do process consulting for another firm called Above Par Advisors, and we're in a project now in academia, and it was a very, very similar situation where the academics department, went out and they said, oh, we need a scheduling software. So they went out and they found this scheduling software that's AI, that is like top of the line, crazy awesome, right? And then they decided they would implement it themselves. They didn't involve the IT department. They didn't involve anybody nobody that knew anything about process improvement or software development or anything was involved in this process, right? So they spent about a little bit over $250,000, and they had a really fancy version of Outlook. It's basically what they had, where they were still, it would take 7 months to schedule 3 months worth of academics, right? So we spent a year on the ground because that's kind of what it was going to take to be able to really get and understand the problem. So part of the problems were that there was no way for the end users to give over the information to the scheduling departments. So there was no bridge between those. So it was all given by paper, and then it was all entered manually. And it was also, we helped build a platform to capture all that information first. But just to go loop back, I don't want to talk about the solution. It's the colossal failure itself, right? That it's not just the little organizations. This is a major academic institution, and even the major institutions think that because the people involved, and I'm not against anything, but just if you have a PhD and you have we can figure it out, and it's not. It's you people in this room that can figure out what those processes are. And it's about getting everybody involved, getting the whole team involved, and getting everybody in the room. And that's ultimately all we did. We got academics together. They had great ideas. They had the fundamental template that they had created is ultimately what we ended up using, but we just automated it. It was just not automated. And so that's, when I look at colossal failures, it's mostly a failure in the team's ability to communicate. In the example that you gave is in the team's ability to communicate the outcomes that they want to produce.
All right, so let's keep rolling on this failure and fixing it. Reema, when things fail, how did you fix it?
So, excellent example following through the case studies that we're talking about. I did come across a consulting assignment where the organization had taken a software that was for project management. Project management software was installed, and suddenly they realized that the actual project managers are not using it. Classic example, because yes, the project management needs of the organization was not vetted fully before buying a software that is for and to be used by the project managers. So there was obviously this change management piece that needed to be built in. So how do you now train the project managers to use this software and make it usable by them to be able to track basic things like cost, effort, and schedule? These are the three important parameters of project management. So how do you fix it? No failure is not fixable. You always have a point of return. So you do invest in training, you do invest in change management, you do invest in understanding whether the adapted version of that software could then be changed to the needs of your organization. So three things that make it to fix it, what you've done wrong.
Okay. Next question here, and I'm going to wait. First, how many people here are project managers? How many people have had a project management software thrust upon them that makes sense, like a football bat makes sense? Okay, so we've all been there.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward, Deepak, you haven't had a chance to talk yet.
Yes.
So I'm going to put you on the spot,
Sure.
and I'm going to set you up for a fight with the other panelists here.
Great, let's do it.
Agree or disagree? The software solution should be extremely obvious if you've done your homework. And I look at the software as almost an afterthought. It should be a really simple decision. Do you agree or do you disagree?
I think I would disagree. I think, one of the tenets of this event today is, fix process first. So kind of having an understanding of the business process. There's value there because you get to identify and define and document what a current state business process looks like for your client. But you also get a lot of stakeholders on the same page about what it looks like. And oftentimes you'll find that there's typically a disconnect around, what the activities may be around a specific process. Whether it's a customer relationship management process or a finance process. It's not just a matter of documenting it, but kind of finding consensus around that potential design.
So I think, from my perspective, it can't be an afterthought, and it often is an afterthought. And I say that because, again, it kind of goes back to my, failure example in the sense that, at this point in time, I kind of call the system another employee. And it's just the employee that makes every other employee look really bad because, they can they can do like 100 things to year one. And, I think that, when you're defining a process, right, you're defining how it flows through the employees and through the organization. And if you don't really truly have I would say really an in-depth understanding and experience thereof of managing that, system employee, I think it can be hard to really articulate a process that, is really going to truly be efficient and smooth because it may work out that way in your mind, but in your mind, everything kind of looks like that front end piece of it, and things may look like forms and whatever, but if you don't really understand, say, how ugly things are in the back end or what your current state is even, I just think that it can be difficult to define how that process looks. So I've had a number of instances where, departments, will come up, to the engineering after the fact and say like, okay, here's how we picture it. Can the system do this? Can you make the system do this? Can you put this in place? And I guess my reaction is, well, let's back up to what your actual objective is. And then it's kind of like, well, no, for your objective, we can do this. We can do like C, we can do D, rather than A and B. So, again, it's just been my experience that to really define a smooth process, I don't think that the sequence of events can be, this is how we envision it, now let's bring in the engineering and see if it's possible. Like, that's a little bit backwards.
You should get one of the engineers on your development team and your assessment team?
And your process team.
What a thought.
Yeah,
Imagine
yeah.
that.
So, and for what it's worth, I mean, I think all of us are kind of realizing that I think Amazon is kind of like, to me, the ultimate example of who's getting this right. I think that they not only understand how a process should look for customers, but they understand how important it is to get their business organization processes right in the back end. And it's interesting to me to see them kind of becoming more a part of the physical world in terms of actually having physical stores and whatnot. And I think that they're going to kind of show just how important that is. And I'm guessing here, but I would certainly imagine that they got their engineers every bit a part of their physical store operations as they do, other domains.
An interesting thought that I have learned during my consulting background is during the gap analysis stage, it depends obviously on the goal of the organization, what they want to improve. That drives who all are going to be involved in this activity. So from a process improvement and project improvement perspective, it's always important to have your engineering, the software development, the testing, all of these teams equally represented in those gap analysis phases. Typically, when you ask questions, what would you like to fix? Those are the times where you'll get the most important answers from different departments, and that drives how you're going to marry the process and the software that goes with improving the life of everybody in that organization.
Okay. Good. So I'm going to take two different cuts at it, right? So one cut is, I agree with you guys. You got to have the team, right? Your technical team and your engineers be part of your operations team and understand the whole process from the beginning. But given that I wear this whole other hat where I help people where it's just like two people in the whole organization, right? And they don't have engineers and they don't have any of those things. So they're usually looking to go buy an off-the-shelf software. And what they often don't have is their process defined. So they just go buying off-the-shelf software, and then they try to cram their process into the off-the-shelf software. We're going to do it like this, and then it doesn't work, and then they end up frustrated and they can't grow. So although I agree with you, I think it depends on the size of the organization. Because if an organization is too small, it really needs to define its processes first and understand what it is that it's trying to do, even. Right? And then once it understands what it's trying to do, then it can go out and start, shopping around for who's going to fix this. Do we need custom development, or is there an off-the-shelf product out there, or a combination of products that are going to work that I can? I was talking to Polar Stork, or their Christian earlier, gratuitous plug, and it was that, right? Sometimes he said something that I thought was really brilliant is. Sometimes you need a combination of products. Sometimes you need a combination of things that you tie together because you're that small. So, as if I take that hat off and I put my other hat back on, when these folks that were in academia were looking at a scheduling software, getting their IT team and their developers and their project managers, which they have a ton of in the organization, on their initial team would have been the right thing to do. And then that didn't happen. So that's kind of my cut at it. And I don't know if you guys want to take a counter at that.
Nobody got in a fight with Deepak.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed. All right, so
Sure, we'll get there.
let's do an audience poll. How many people work with companies, either your company or your clients, that do under 500 million in revenue? How many with greater than 500 million in revenue? Okay, so we got a little bit of a mix. So since we have more of the small, let's ask this question. When do you use off-the-shelf software, and when do you get the automation, the RPA, the robotic process automation? What are some things you look at to make these decisions?
I mean, my take on it is the software supporting really kind of like a core function of your business? In which case, it probably has to be highly customized. But realize that in today's world, actually, the word customize kind of takes on a little bit of a different meaning, because there's such a now organized, collaborative, open source community around various frameworks, as they call them, that you can it's not truly customized. So somebody's not starting from scratch on your application. I mean, to be honest, even like with Salesforce, like one Salesforce implementation can look entirely different from another. So, that's not off-the-shelf software. That's actually a very customized version of it. So to more directly answer your question, I think you can take a framework and highly customize it if it's something that, again, is focused on your core business, which usually runs around, lead management, constituent, management, and whatever service it is that you're offering them. But if it's, say, something that's kind of, if it's a back office function that's not your core function, then there's probably off-the-shelf software that you can use.
I think in terms of off-the-shelf or robotics, it depends on how intrinsic your business process is, what kind of industry you belong to, how easy it is for you to change and adapt new software. A robotics process kind of automates your existing business processes. Also, it reduces the human dependency of it all, but it also requires a lot of customization. It might also lead to questions such as the risk, the part whether that robotics process automation is dependable enough, where you've tested, tried, and now it can run on its own. So different needs depending on the size, depending on the process that you're trying to improve, the work that you're trying to achieve, drives whether you should go for COTS with customization, of course, or a RPA kind of environment.
Did you have a thought on
No.
Okay. So let's go back to the personal side of it, because most people here are in the software are very technical. I am not. I'm not a software guy. Did work in development for a little bit, but there's the other side of when things fail that is not due to the technology, it's due to the people. So two things here. Yeah. So when the decision makers don't communicate, so you have a big implementation, what do you do?
I can add a bit over here. Before you look ahead, you should look around you. I think the decision makers should make sure that their verticals, their LOBs, their infrastructure, their operations, their client, customer-facing organization, all these verticals are talking amongst each other in terms of what your business goals are. That drives what kind of interaction you have to do amongst each other. Second thing is, when you have a project going and where you have different parties involved and you're working with different consultants, get the consultants working. I can think of an example where, the business process for that organization needed improvement. Several teams of consultants were hired to work on software development processes, the project management processes, the operational processes, service delivery processes. However, these consultants were not talking to each other. They were working on silos. And the end product was the different documentation, the different analysis that came out of all 4 different teams was so disparate that they had to scrap the project. And not to mention the time, the effort that the people who were being interviewed that were putting into these 4 teams, providing them ideas about how their current process is. So you have to get talking. And one of the things that I think is very important is for people who are part of that organization, when they see these teams not working together, not interacting, they have to encourage that discussion through their chain of command to say, okay, this is where I see a problem. If you are talking about developing this piece of the process, but you're not discussing the interfacing organization, which is the sales and accounts management, then we have a problem. So people who are involved in these projects, subject matter experts, they have the responsibility to drive these discussions within their teams so that that kind of bubbles up to the management.
Do you want to go or do you want me to go?
Oh, no, please.
Okay. So I think from just as I've been a consultant, I've been accused a couple of times of breaking glass and whatever the hell that whatever that means, but is you got to step into the danger. You got to go to the top person and say, this is really going to suck. It's going to be horrible. You're going to throw your money away. And you need to understand that. And if you're okay with that, then we can run it the way we're running it. Or we could get everybody in a room and develop a process that's going to work for everybody. And everybody, because of the politics that exists and bureaucracy that exists in organizations, people are afraid to say that. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. I guess I'm just getting old, so I don't care. I just walk in and I tell it like it is and then let them deal with me and I manage whatever happens in that conversation. I've done that. I've walked into big CEOs and I've said, this is where we are in the project. I need your input here. He's like, well, I don't want to be involved. Too bad. It's your company. You got to be involved. Well, the politics, I said exactly. That's why you have to be involved, because you're the one ultimately that's going to inherit this train wreck. So do you want the train wreck or not? And I think it's up to us as the people that are developing the things to look and see when you know that there's going to be a train wreck. It's like you're developing a piece that has to interface with another piece and you haven't talked to anybody on that team. Stop.
Exactly. And I'll tack on to that. It's funny because in today's world, I feel like you're hearing senior level management say one of two things. Either we're a technology company, which is traditionally, in some, financial aspect or whatever, is usually not thought of as a technology company, or we're not a technology company. Yeah. So in other words, I think that those people that are saying, look, we're not a technology company, are trying to do exactly what you're talking about, which is disinherit, kind of this,
The tech guys run it.
Yeah. It's just I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. They do it. I don't know. Yeah. And, the answer is too bad. You're responsible no matter who you give that to. So to own that, you better make sure that you have somebody internally who can handle that.
Or bring somebody externally, right? So if you see that it's blowing up, and then make that recommendation. Say, hey, go find an above par advisor's gratuitous plug that can come in and help you do that process improvement, because that's what it is. It's really getting all the communications and getting the processes in.
Either way, yeah, it's owning it and owning the fact that, even if you outsource it or whatever, that you have got to be responsible for it. So yeah, to me, in my personal opinion, every company is a technology company, whether you like it or not.
That's right.
Every company is a technology company.
Yeah, it seems like, things are moving in that direction. Some companies are obviously a little more fast forward, like the Googles or the Facebooks or the Netflix or the Amazons, like you mentioned. But having some sponsorship around the work is important, and I think that's what some of the panelists are pointing out.
So who here has had direct direct contact with the client's CEO. Who here has had to have that heart-to-heart and say, hey, you got a train wreck coming? You've had Christian? Yeah, it's a fun conversation. Yep. All right, so what questions do we have from the audience here?
So I'm not in the consulting world. I'm just a project manager. I work for my company. We're doing a large-scale software implementation to hopefully help us fix our process. That's why I'm here. So can you guys answer that question that you just answered from the perspective of not being a consultant? So of being a member of the organization who's trying to implement this change, and how you then get members of your team, particularly CTO, global CTOs, things like that, who have to have buy-in, who, again, they don't want to have that buy-in. Some of the strategies you would use from that perspective.
This sounds like a change management issue.
Yeah, I mean, just so I'm aware, like what software are you implementing?
Oracle.
Yes.
So essentially, I work in a hardware asset management piece of this.
Okay.
So they purchased Oracle for the procurement. They purchased Oracle for two separate modules, one for procurement, one for billing. But then they completely left out the asset management portion of Oracle, and we're using our homegrown tools and pushing updates every 3 hours and coming back out.
And where are you with it? Like start, middle, end?
We're in phase 1 full implementation, like as of January 1st, like, hey, here's the tool, use it. And now we're kind of dealing with the growing pains associated with that.
Yeah, and are you using like a project management process or methodology to help shepherd?
So we're actually basically had the tool foisted upon us.
Okay.
Basically told, hey, we're using this is how you use it, but from the upstream process, not how you use it in your actual job. So now I'm in the process of documenting how all of our processes have changed as a result of the tool that's been implemented. And now trying to understand how we can actually adopt basically utilize the tool to our advantage as we're actually adopting it.
Okay. Where do you feel like your biggest pain point is right now?
My organization, so get another step deeper, I work in the data center team.
Okay.
So we're the ones utilizing the tool on a day-to-day basis to map where our hardware is, but we're stuck between a rock and a hard place because we don't have the procurement team has the relationship with the consultants, the Oracle team, and then our internal development team is the ones who we have to kind of beg and plead to make changes to our internal existing system and where they interact. So we're right in the middle where we use it every day, but we have no control over the strategy of it or any of the changes that we actually want to make.
Yeah, I mean, how large is the team?
So team is global. It's at 25 people, so not very large. But as a company, we're managing assets in nearly every single country that has a stock exchange in the world,
right.
As well as the shipping and RMA processes that are associated with getting things to all those sites. So
right, and so the Oracle package will be like your system of record. That'll be the
yeah, exactly. Except for the fact that the middle piece where we can actually move assets between locations is taking place on a homegrown platform that is being forced to integrate with Oracle.
And how do you feel like some of the attitudes or behaviors of your teammates or the people being impacted by the system are?
It's very negative. It's not to say that what we had worked before we implemented Oracle, right? Because again, it was a homegrown piece where we were continuously interacting, but had no say over the changes or how it worked. So it's just gotten a little bit more negative now that there's a new tool involved.
Yeah, and there's we can go. We can talk more about it offline, but yeah, it does sound like there's process and technology adoption issues around there. It sounds like, like you mentioned, like people are negative about this particular change, and thinking about what Reema said earlier. There are change management strategies and tools that you can use or employ to kind of get around some of that negative attitude. Maybe they've had issues with other large-scale changes in the past. Maybe the project manager is not respected. Maybe there isn't a steering committee. Maybe you're not getting buy-in, commitment, or support. Do you have a change management work stream?
It's related to not related to this in any way. It's related to the data center projects that we're doing. So,
Okay.
And this is not considered a data center project. This is
Right. Large scale ERP
organizational
implementation.
project. Yeah. So naturally there's no one running it.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. And
So nobody's in charge.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think maybe we found one of the core issues.
Well, part of, and just to jump in really quick, thank you, that was really great. Like really, these are really
Thanks.
awesome, right? So, but the and, not but and, I'm trying to hold on. I got to get my arms around this.
Yeah,
thing,
no, it's,
okay?
and really what I'm just trying to figure out is some of the strategies. that
Yeah,
we
but
have.
here's one of the things that I've noticed in organizations like this, right? Is that you have this really cool piece of software you put here, and this really cool piece of software you put here, and there's a missing piece of software that goes in the middle that exists, that just needs to be purchased, but everybody's afraid to tell the person that controls the purse strings, hey, you've got to spend another $2 million to get this piece in place. And when we started doing this work in the academic field, that was the thing. It's like, the budget, the budget, right? Can't do it because of the budget. And then we went and spoke to the powers that be. We kind of bypassed that whole loop, right? Went directly to the dean of the organization and said, this is how much money you're losing because you have this problem. And he said, oh, how much is it going to cost? I said 4 times what you spent the last time. Okay, let's do it. Sign the check. Here you go. Let's get it done. So nobody's talking to whoever is responsible for getting the ultimate outcome and saying, hey, there's a piece that's missing here that is killing the spirit of the organization and the teams. And here's your lag, your latency. Here's the piece that's not working. And somebody has to say that. And it might be you.
Yeah.
Right?
I would have no problem doing it.
And so that's the thing, right? Is you just got to go say it. And the problem is that you try to work through all the channels and all the and if I could just put my hand like this. And but that's the thing, right? You're trying to bend yourself inside out, and sometimes you just got to go have a straight conversation. And that's the thing that one of the reasons why I got out of working with big organizations is because of all these channels and all that. With the little guys, you just kind of tell them what to do, and then they do it, and it's great, right? With the bigger organizations, you got to have 10 committee meetings and 3 board meetings and 3.
Get on the schedule.
Yeah, and you have to get on the schedule. You have to get the whole team to fly in and all that stuff. But somebody has to say, here's the problem right here. And if we deal with this is how much more money we'll make. So my recommendation, for whatever it's worth, is you got to look at what is the monetary impact that dysfunction has, and then highlight it and bring it to somebody who's going to go, oh, crap, what do we need to do to fix this? And then you give them the solution. I mean, that's for whatever that's worth.
I think one of the things that's also important for you to, meanwhile, do research and be ready for it when you have that conversation is what's the additional effort that's being taken for that gap? What is the workaround that you're doing to make that gap being fixed in the meanwhile? Sometimes the quantitative piece of it, the effort that is being put in by these additional people, would drive that conversation better in terms of, okay, we need to fix that and we need to fix that tomorrow.
One other point to that. I mean, it sounds to me like, your pain points just aren't being felt or cared about by, I guess, the people who have the purse strings. Is that the issue?
Yeah, we can put it that way. That makes sense.
I mean, to me, again, that's this isn't a wonderful, explanation or advice, but it just kind of goes to the fact that it's somebody at your organization not really owning the whole process, and I just see that kind of, to me, it's what I call the agency problem that exists in insurance, where it's like, if it's your complexity, well, F you, I don't, what do I care? But to me, again, that kind of comes to the fact that it's an organizational structural problem, which, again, you probably can't do anything about. But owning process, to me, like this, to me, the COO has got to have, in my mind, an engineering background. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that is the person who's going to own it all the way through.
That's crazy talk.
You heard it here first. Because I see that a lot.
Who's in charge of it? That guy, right?
Yeah.
Bill, question.
Quite often when you have to fix process, you have to change it or you have to add new processes included. What are your suggestions on getting the resistance to the process eliminated or at least reduced?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great question. I don't think you'll ever eliminate it. I mean, because we're talking about feelings, right?
Yeah.
And we're ultimately talking about attitudes or behaviors. So I think mitigating it is certainly a possibility. We were talking about, the Oracle implementation and how potentially there's not like a change management work stream. So it's possible that a lot of that resistance is not being addressed. I think part of the challenge with change management is it's less tangible than some of the other work streams or some of the other areas, but it's come a long way. Where you can kind of identify and define, change management needs. If you have experience with it. So, I think having a robust or strong change management work stream and change management lead and change management team adds a lot of value, and that kind of discipline should be a part of your project management process.
Change management man, through and through.
Yeah.
So for us, one of we've learned to sometimes things are out of our wheelhouse, right? So we're doing the process improvement, but we work with this great organization called the Handel Group, and what they do is the Handel Group, and what the Handel Group does is cultural transformation. So sometimes when you come in and that you see that there are some embedded and ingrained cultural things in the organization that are going to cause resistance, our recommendation is let's bring these guys in and see what's happening in your culture, right? And then you poke that little monster for a little while and it's going to flare up. But then what you do is you have to shift the cultural thinking, because people will resist change. It is just, and then it's built into the machine. Your amygdala, your whole thing is designed to resist change. So unless you're motivated and inspired by something. When you're motivated and inspired by something, then you embrace change. So what has to happen very often when you're doing a large-scale transformation, you're changing all the processes, is you have to deal with the EQ first. You have to deal with the emotional quotient first. If you don't deal with the EQ first, then it's a fight. And you're going to get the fight of your life unless you deal with the EQ. If you deal with the EQ and people buy in and they're excited and they're like, this change is coming, but let me tell you all the good things that are going to happen, and you hear the buzz in the organization and people are excited about what's going to happen, and they can see it and they can taste it and they've imagined it, and you've shown them screenshots and they're all excited about it because you created the environment for that change. So from our perspective, when we come in and we're going to do a large organizational change, we always have to deal with the culture first. And since that's not primarily in our wheelhouse, we understand how to work with it. But we bring in organizations like the Handel Group, which that's their specialty. I mean, they teach at Yale and MIT and Stanford and all over the world on that particular thing. So we can then help do that cultural transformation.
So I'll tack on one other thing. So I think to your point, it's really about culture. And, again, you don't have to be a technology company to accept the notion of, fail fast and that kind of thing, and not being afraid of doing that. That's applicable to everyone. And that's a philosophy, obviously, that isn't naturally drawing people to it. Nobody likes to fail. Nobody likes the pain of going through something that wasn't perfect. But to your point, you got to go headlong and you got to be dedicated. So I think it's just a cultural, kind of mantra that you have to kind of keep saying over and over again that you're always going to try. Because I know, like for me, I've dealt with a lot of people where they make the argument of like, well, it's just different, it's not better. You will hear that a lot, and like that right there is just kind of a mentality that is going to stay in the status quo and is never going to improve.
Yeah, and it'll kill the growth of a project, that mentality.
One of the things that also goes with this change management is for strategic projects where there is a big overall of change in the system, is also gearing your organization with organizational departmental changes, aligning your structure, your corporate structure to meet that goal. So and also communication, one of the aspirational questions that we ask, what would you like one thing to be changed in the way you do your job? If your team, your frontline workforce sees that benefit of what you're doing into that transformation, that's where they're motivated. Communicating to them on a timely manner where we are with that project, where are we, constant feedback to them saying, okay, we are at phase 1, this is what we're achieving, that keeps them motivated enough to be participating enough, So these are some of the ideas that I also see apart from, what gentlemen have already spoken about.
Could you tell us without, breaking any confidentiality, but some public cases of companies that really get this culture question right? I've seen plenty of examples of companies that, despite the fact that they completely screw this up, they're dominant companies in their field somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they were just lucky, But who can name a couple of companies in a couple of different, 1 or 2 fields that really get this right?
Zappos gets it. I think Zappos really gets it. They get it. Zappos, the shoe guys. They get it. They get it. Their whole
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought they were just purchased.
but their whole culture, they get it. They understand it. I mean, they have an interview process where they'll fly you in, right? You get there in the morning, and they're like, hey, this is our company. This is where all the departments are. Here's the cafeteria. Go talk to people. At 3 o'clock is your interview. Come and be at this office at 3 o'clock. And they don't walk you around and let you talk to selected people. They're like, just go. Go and talk to whoever you want. Ask whatever questions you want. And then at 3 o'clock, you come for your interview. Then at 3 o'clock, you come for your interview. They do your interview. They ask you a bunch of questions that have to do with their core values. Right? But their last core value is humility. So they don't have a whole bunch of questions for that because, how do you test for that? Are you humble? I'm the humblest person you've ever met, right? So then they put you back on the shuttle van and they send you back to the airport. And then they bring the shuttle van back the driver back of the shuttle van, and they interview him to see how that person treated them. And that's how they test for humility. They have figured out their process, and they understand that if the culture of the organization is not driving, that they're not going to get the results. They're not going to get people that love being there because they love being there.
I want to, before you all give me your other examples, I want to mention that there's someone I know who runs a company, his own company. The way he would interview people, he would invite them to lunch. And he would see whether they put salt on their food before they tasted it. And anyone who put salt on his food before he tasted it, he was never going to hire.
Yeah.
So what was the justification around that?
Well, to see whether there's any need for you to put salt on it. Do you put in preconceptions to what you do? And that makes you rigid, when it may not be, may
end up with salty food.
Bill, I put hot sauce on my food before I get it because I like it really spicy. Right? So my preconceived notion is it's not spicy enough for me, but that seems
Okay.
Well, I mean, I did kind of obviously I gave the example of Amazon before, but as Amazon goes into these physical stores and whatnot, I mean, I really don't think we should think of them as a technology company as only that. Like again, I guarantee you, with that graphic that I showed before, I don't think their back end looks like that. I think that they get the fact that all of their pieces, their back end is just as important as their front end experience. And I think they get when to use technology, when not to use technology, quite frankly. Like if I email about a problem with my Amazon order, like I actually get a person. Like I get a person right away. And so it's not all about automating absolutely everything. It's really just understanding about kind of like the whole ecosystem and how that works. But, in the financial world, right, I mean, it was Lloyd Blankfein that said, like, we're a technology company. And he rose through the ranks, his CIO, and did it that way. And, I think you see the same thing with Jamie Dimon, like he has definitely embraced how technology is going to be used in his company. And so I think that all of these things are, kind of, again, to me, I don't know that I can really separate technology from process, and that's not to say that everything is done by technology. It's just like understanding how to lay that out, I think takes an embrace of technology that we're really just starting to see. And so, again, to me, it's like at least the leadership that says, we are a technology company, because I think, again, that's true of everyone. And then, I think gradually what we're going to continue to see is actually taking those engineering concepts and really applying them up front in your strategy decisions over how you're going to run your business. So I think that piece isn't there yet, but I think we'll get there.
We have more questions from the audience.
I got one. So my name is Kris. I think my question is more targeted towards smaller companies, and how do you do to avoid the overkill? Sometimes when you try to build processes and you try to automate, you end up having a very complicated process you could just solve with a Google form and a CSV. So, do you have any indicators that you've gone through?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first, the first thought that comes to mind is, have you met the requirements that, of let's say the deliverable that you were working on? Did you get feedback? Did you get a review? Did it meet the mark? Maybe they only wanted 80%, or maybe your supervisor wanted you to take it 100%. Are you getting feedback on your work product?
No, I think I'm talking maybe a step before. So when you're conceiving, when you're setting down the process, and ideally on a large scale, you would have done all the steps, but in different situation, different scale of a company, there are steps you would not automate, or you would not, you would keep manual just because the cost is higher than the implementation itself. And that goes probably more towards every company is a technology company direction, where we still have this hybrid state and at some level. Well,
yeah, so I mean, I think you got to kind of be realistic about what technology can do, right? So like we're talking about AI a lot these days, right? And it sounds really great, and it probably will be, right? But we're really not there yet. So I'll give you an example of something that luckily stopped short before we went too far down. But we had just implemented Zendesk for support. And, this person in the unit thought that it was going to be able to like automatically answer questions, in kind of like this AI form. And I think he contemplated, really getting consultants in to try and do this. Now, like the nature of the questions that we were getting just wasn't really going to lend itself to automatic answering. So, again, I think, you just got to have somebody who kind of understands the state of things to really know what should be automated, what shouldn't be automated. You got to kind of, I don't know how to say it other than you need somebody with like kind of at least hands-on experience who's going to know that trying to automate, these questions, these answers to these questions is going to create more questions, and like that's definitely not the path you want to go down.
So from my perspective, I work a lot with small businesses, right? So it's like, when is it enough automation, or when is not? Is that kind of your question? When is it enough automation, or when is it too much, right? So there's a couple of different things that I look at, right? Because the way our process works, we use this thing called the Merlin principle. So, and just the short of it, right? So, young kid walking through the woods, lost, it's been lost for hours, dirty, hungry, looks up, sees some smoke, runs up, there's his house, lifts his hand up to knock the door, door swings open. There's an old man with a beard standing there. He says, young Arthur, I've been expecting you. He goes, how do you know my name? He goes, come on. I've been expecting you. Look, and then there's lunch on the table is all ready, and his favorite food is there. And he's like, how did you know I was coming? He says, my name is Merlin. And unlike you, I was born at the other end of time. So I only remember the future, right? So when we're working with small businesses, we look 15 years out. Where do we want to be? And then the processes that we create now have to be consistent with that. And so I think to answer your question, what you have to do is look, where does the company want to be next year and the year after that and the year after that? But you really got to start out there and then work your way backward. How do we get here? How do we get here? How do we get here? That'll tell you exactly how far to go today in your automation, right? Because you won't go any further than you need to if you're working from the future. If you're trying to figure it out from right now, good luck, buddy. It's just not going to happen because you have nothing to base it on. But if you say, okay, we're at 200,000 now, but in 10 years, we're going to be at 15 million. Well, how did we get here? Imagine that future, exactly what happened. What are the structures that are in place? I'm working with a small doctor's office now. And inside of doing that looking, what we figured out is that he's going to have to spend a lot more money in his EHR than he's spending now on his electronic health records and he's spending now because of the kind of scaling that he wants to do and the velocity that he wants to do it at. So we looked, okay, 80 practices in 15 years. So we're going to be at 80 practices in 15 years. Do we want to, next year, when we have 5 practices, have to redo the whole EHR infrastructure again? Or do we do it now that it's just you and the secretary, right? And there's just the two of you, and we build it now, and then we can scale it to then. So that was the decision we made. So that's the only good answer I have for that question is you have to look from the future. If you don't look from there, then you can't gauge, right?
I mean, I'll say this too. Sometimes you get, I don't know your specific, example and what was involved, but I've certainly seen instances where, just in an effort to get a system onto a person's resume, they'll advocate for putting in this system to do this process. And we all have to suffer because you want to put this on your resume, So, you have to kind of get at to why that happened, what were the motivations and, try and behave accordingly.
Okay, so I think we're getting close to wrapping up. So we're going to have one final thought, a brief thought from each of our panelists. I want you to say, what is one thing you would like people to take away from this? And I'm going to go first. The one thing that I learned that I'm taking away, and I think would make sense for everyone else, is it's not necessarily process technology in that order. It's first understand the people and their feelings and their emotions, then the process, then the technology. So I'm going to change my thinking a little bit. It's emotions, people, process, technology. So what's one final thought from each of you? We'll just go left to right, or whoever wants to go first. So.
Right. I feel like, I too kind of learned from your experiences and kind of what makes for good process. And I think, my takeaway is the importance of culture, the importance of getting, all of the feedback and kind of having a holistic view.
In terms of key takeaway, I would like everyone in this room to feel empowered to give feedback back to your teams, to your management when things go wrong. Don't stay quiet when you see things going wrong and when you see the business needs and the project needs kind of mismatched during the process, raise a hand.
Yeah, I have to agree with Kris and Reema that, try to take a more holistic approach. I obviously advocate for change management because, that's when there's a budget cut, that's like the first work stream that they I actually just came off a piece of work where that's the first place they cut. Well, they were having layoffs, so they cut a lot of people. But yeah, but just kind of looking at your implementation more holistically. Yeah, I think that's very important.
I was thinking while you guys were talking, so I agree with everything you say. I think it's awesome, and it's critical, right? Like, you want to have all that. You have to raise your hand. You have to work from the change management place. But if there's anything that I want you to take away is, for yourself, are you inspired by what your organization is doing? Are you moved by it? Are you interested in being part of the thing that's going to take them to the next level? And if you're not, then, you know, you got two options. Find a new home or get inspired. Find a way, find the place, the mentor, the thing that you need inside of your organization that's going to get you there, because that will have you take all the action. That will always have you raise your hand. That will always have you be accountable. It's really taking ownership. This is mine. If you operate from that place, this is mine, you're always going to produce outstanding results. That's what I...
Thank you, panel.